Hello and welcome to A Pint of Cthulhu. Myself, Matt, and I have my co-host Jay here. And today we are interviewing Wes, who has created and successfully kickstarted the game No Nazis in Valhalla. I had to restrain myself just then. So, Wes, would you like to start us off with the first question that we ask every guest? If you could say A Pint of Cthulhu was any type of drink, what would it be?
That's a hard one. Maybe a something that's probably pretty awful to drink, but a nice dark beer with a shot of absinthe dropped into it. It's definitely sufficiently weird enough, and it would be interesting to drink. That's for sure.
At some point, Matt, if and when the cast meets up, we need to compile all the suggestions people have had and try them out. We have a nice
I don't
open
think
bar.
we're going to be able to try a glass of cosmic horror, though.
No, we've had like absinthe, Guinness, a couple of other things feature heavily.
Oh god, that Guinness one. Oh. Just no. Okay, Jay, would you like to ask the first question?
Of course. So, Wes, tell us a bit about yourself, really. Just
Sure.
who are you? What do you do?
I am Wes Ascalese, native Texan here in the United States. I just got started into indie RPGs probably about 3 years ago now. Well, maybe a bit before that, but anyway, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons forever, and then until recently I had played it pretty much up until I got into indie TTRPGs. And when I got into indie games, I was introduced to Morkborg, and I produced my first product, which was Beyond Deep. And I'm a filthy leftist, communist, what have you. Use whatever you'd like to describe me. But Beyond Deep explores worker exploitation and things like that, specifically in the backdrop of something similar to the American coal mining industry and things like that. Heavily influenced by another podcast called Old Gods of Appalachia, but also just some of my family is from around the Appalachian area. I have friends, and I've always been interested in that sort of time period. And that went very well. So, of course, I wanted to do more. But it took me a while to get onto No Nazis in Valhalla. I'd had the idea for probably about 2 years prior to this Kickstarter. And my friend Chris Koger wrote a system called Grindcore, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it seemed to fit what I wanted to do, and so I kind of ran with it and kind of just did it on a whim this year. It didn't advertise much or anything, yet somehow I still reached my goal. So yeah, I just kind of do what I want when I want. I'm not heavily business focused on my RPG products. I just kind of want to get stuff out there that expresses my values and things that I would like to see in games.
Fair play. So can you tell us a bit about this latest creation, No Nazis in Valhalla?
Absolutely. So I'll start with how it even got into my mind. I was at a witch festival, which sounds spooky and fun, but it's really just a bunch of vendors selling crystals, t-shirts, various witch-related and pagan-related paraphernalia. And I met this wonderful artist who's local to me, named Wendy Fitch. And she had a shirt that said "No Nazis in Valhalla," and I was like, that's just the coolest thing I've ever seen. And so I wore that shirt for a long time. And I don't know, in case anyone doesn't know, but in the pagan community, and specifically the Norse pagan community, there's a big issue with white supremacists and them co-opting symbols and traditions for their own nefarious means. So I kind of like the idea of outright telling them that they're not allowed in the space that they want to be. And so shortly thereafter, I messaged Wendy, hey, I want to make a game about this. She was all for it. And then for the longest time, I was just spinning wheels and couldn't get anything going. But every couple of months I would check in with Wendy being like, hey, is it still cool if I use this? And she was very nice and very forthcoming with any sort of images I wanted to use. I didn't end up using any of her images because I think she deserves to be paid for her art, and there wasn't a lot of meat on the bones, so to speak, with this project. At any rate, though, so I started writing shortly before I started the Kickstarter, and basically the premise is it is the late World War II. The Nazis are losing. They know that they're losing, and the Thule Society, through goetic magic or esotericism type things, time travel back in time to a time in which they think A, they can take over, B, they think they'll be welcomed with open arms due to their obsession with Norse mythology and other things. And then turns out they end up getting to the what is now the UK in the invasion of the Great Heathen Army, as it's so wonderfully called. And the Norse tend to disagree with them, and in doing so, they are empowered by the Norse deities to fight off this new invasion, and players take control of heroic Vikings, for better or worse, and get to do kind of whatever they want, but generally destroying Nazis and foiling their plans is the name of the game.
Nice. So, do you have any connection with Norse countries or paganism yourself, then?
I've always... I am eternally fascinated with everything Scandinavian, from prehistory to current, and obviously the time period that's like most documented, really documented after the fact, but most talked about is the Viking era, which is roughly about 6th century, mid 6th century, to roughly the 12th century, very beginning of the 12th century, with William the Conqueror being the death knell of the Viking era. I also tend to flock to areas that have a lot of unsavory people in them, and try to make people aware of their presence and get them kicked out or noticed, and try to ostracize as much hate as I can. And
clearing out the trash.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah. Fair play to you. I think I should introduce you to Kimber. She's our resident pagan witch.
Very cool.
I think also maybe just because you said the communism, like social stuff, maybe the Salvage Union guys would like to talk to them.
Maybe.
Plotting and planning.
So,
Yes.
with your game, can you tell us about the core mechanics? How exactly do you balance the whole guns, modern semi-modernish warfare compared to Vikings and the mystical gods and things like that?
Sure. So mechanically, it's fairly simple. It's the players just have better dice than the enemies, but and that's by design. That is so that it feels good and doesn't feel like you're dodging bullets. Lore-wise, all of these people who go up against the Nazis are empowered by supernatural beings, And also, on a more realistic point, the Nazis are at the end of the war, and they were having real supply line issues. I used to be a bit into World War II, I guess, as most male-born folks in the United States are at some point. Oddly enough, war culture and all that good stuff. But yeah, so supply lines were terrible for them at the end of the war. You know, a lot of their weapons had high rates of fire and needed their barrels replaced quite frequently. So that's part of some of the mechanics and things like that. Also, just the lack of being in a modern era where you can just manufacture bullets and things like that is somewhat of the realism. But obviously, we're talking about time-traveling Nazis fighting magically powered Vikings. So there's some suspension of disbelief for sure. But I mean, the Vikings have powers that are, I mean, if you follow Thor, you get a power that enables you to essentially blow up a tank or any other large thing with a single action. And
damn,
yeah,
nice.
So you're definitely superhero powered type of characters. It's a bit more dangerous than say like D&D 5e, but it is definitely not. It is, while the system was built for an OSR game, this is OSR adjacent. You are definitely playing a more heroic role.
Nice. So, how did you approach the world building aspect of this? Because obviously you're sitting in a somewhat real world kind of situation. The Vikings actually existed and such, not completely fantasy land, but how did you... Are the gods, like, known about by regular people before this, or do they show up specifically to punch Nazis?
Well, so it's fairly realistic in that sense, in that the Vikings were already obviously at this point. So it takes place in around the year 865 AD in England, and there's this large army that gets called the Great Heathen Army. That's made up of a bunch of different smaller armies. That its intention was to go take over all of England. Now, while they have strong belief system, I sort of set it up to where that they didn't have so much actual magic before it was needed, essentially. The gods existed in their minds and things like that, and then they presented themselves in a time of great need is sort of the overall narrative, because I like that idea. Also, I'm big into esotericism, and so that's predominantly around a book called the Goetia, or the Key of Solomon. It's a lot of... It's what people would call like satanic magic. It's not particularly satanic. It's believed to be made up by the Italians in around 14th century, something like that. But it's made to look as though it's like pre-biblical and things like that. And anyway, it's a fascinating subject that I could talk about for a long time. But the Thule Society was really big into mysticism and things like that, so it kind of was a natural fit. The Thule Society being the Nazis' sort of supernatural experts / secret society type of thing.
Yeah, I've seen quite a bit of them from my own like interests in history and conspiracy theories, especially if you trace back enough modern ones, you just find the same like 5 dudes from the Nazi Party.
Yep.
From Cyclops skulls to the end of the world.
Yep.
All circles back.
So, can you make your own Viking in this, or do you have preset characters?
So that's a big thing that I wanted to have in this, is that it's all completely modular, so you will be making your own Viking. Essentially, pieces that you put together. There's no classes. There are somewhat archetypes, but you get to pick and choose. So you have your... there are 5 main leaders to the Great Heathen Army historically, so I put them in there, and basically you get an ability from following them that speaks to their character. There's also a 6th option where you can be unaffiliated. Then after that, you sort of pick your patron deity. You get 2 abilities out of the 4 to choose from each one. I have 6 currently. In future iterations, I will have many more. So that's already, 24 abilities to choose from, and then another 12 from the leaders. And then after that, you get to choose your sort of background, vocation, job, what have you. Things like the Berserker or the Vulva, which is like a soothsayer, or a hunter, things like that. And those give you yet another two options out of 4 to choose from. And then when you level up, you can choose any ability from either the gods or the background talents to give yourself. You do not have to stick to one thing. So it's very modular in that respect. I didn't want anyone to fall into like, oh, well, this Viking's a healer, this Viking's, a damage dealer, etc., etc. I want you to make sort of your own thing.
Nice. So, what's the kind of player experience are you aiming to create with this game? So, more hack and slashy, more talking thing?
So it's definitely, I always like to say the cover is definitely a Nazi getting an axe through his face. So combat combat is definitely the focus. However, it's also takes a bit of inspiration from a game called Band of Blades, where it's sort of military focused. There are opportunities to roleplay, quite a few of them. And you may not always be fighting and killing. You may be sabotaging, you may be exploring, scouting, etc. There's definitely it is not a catch-all system. It is not I wouldn't recommend this for any sort of high politics and negotiation style things, but there's definitely... You can kind of do whatever you want with the system. The system is relatively rules light, and it can suit a lot of needs, but it is definitely more military focused.
So you were saying about combat just then. How do you go about balancing that? What kind of roles are we talking about here? I mean, you're fighting off against Nazis with limited resources, you're shooting lightning at them. What kind of roles are you making here? It is completely player side dice. So if you are being attacked, you are rolling to dodge or block or what have you. You have attributes, like in most games, that determine your finesse, your physical strength, your intelligence, etc. And if you can come up with a good enough reason to roll a specific stat, you can kind of roll it. So it's definitely meant to be at the advantage of the players. A lot of the enemies are kind of predetermined. They have a tier system in which they just do X amount of damage. There will be optional rules for rolling that damage if you want a bit more swingy combat, but they will do basically they're tier 1 through 6. They will do an average of the D6 equivalent to their tier. So if it's a tier 6, they will be doing 6 D6, but average on that. So it's kind of a very tactical game for the players in that respect, because they understand what the challenges are very specifically. And then from on a how do I survive gunfire, there's tons of supernatural abilities that
allow blocking of bullets, stealth abilities, ability to manipulate the terrain before the fight, things like that as well. You'll definitely have to, like, if you come upon a castle that has a bunch of MG42 light machine guns posted on it, you may have to think about what you need to do. You may have to understand that you cannot, just because you are super heroic does not mean you are bulletproof.
God, this already sounds so fun.
It does. It really does.
I can't wait to try it out. So what challenges did you face during the development of your game? Was there anything that was, like, really difficult to sort out?
Yeah, and not to tell on myself, but that's kind of why we rescheduled the playtest. Is there are so many abilities that I needed to write, because not only did I write 4 abilities for, so let's see, there's 6 classes, we'll call them classes, 6 gods. Each of those have 4 each, so that's 48. Plus another 12 from the leaders, so that's 60. And then on top of that, I gave each one an out of combat, or like a more vague ability, so that to get people's brains thinking, because also you can just kind of make up what you do with the ability. These are more guidelines. But so basically I wrote 120 abilities, so that was my main hurdle, is just a ton of work. Something that I didn't quite realize, and then I was like, oh yeah, that's a lot. Luckily they kind of just come to you once you start get going. Things start to make sense when you build a world around it, so it's not as horrifying as it sounds, but it definitely was a struggle.
Yeah, I mean, that many abilities alone, how on earth have you not driven yourself mad?
I think we're all mad here. I mean, I think that's kind of the point of developing TTRPGs and playing them.
So, obviously, we're not going to be the first people to playtest this. How have you taken feedback from playtest groups? How did that help you develop what you're creating now, what you're nearly finished with?
Yeah, the bulk of the writing is done, just tweaking things now, honestly. But feedback, it all comes in the form of what feels good at the table. With a rules light system, there is no way that you can really take, this is advice to anyone who wants to listen. If you write a rules light system, someone inevitably is going to tell you, hey, I think this needs to be a rule, or this needs to be a rule, or this needs to be a rule, or this needs to be a rule. It doesn't. You can I am very much a believer of rulings, not rules. That's kind of a big OSR philosophy. That is how games used to be played. And while I love crunchy games, I love games that have a rule for everything. If you're setting out to write a rules light system, do not try to do that. Don't turn it into a crunchy game. If you want to write a crunchy game, write a crunchy game. But that being said, you can have lots of guidelines, lots of clarifying language, things that will lead players in a direction that you want to go. So feedback comes in the form of, oh, it feels like I just kill everything I touch, or I feel like I'm not doing any damage, or I feel like I have 3 skills that are the same exact thing, just with different flavor text. And obviously with 120-ish abilities, that's a big feedback that I like to take. Luckily, I've been pretty good on the variety, so I haven't gotten a ton of that yet, but it will remain to be seen. This is coming out in September. It is now almost June. So a lot of playtesting will be happening in the next 2 months. I've kind of gotten past the... and actually I'm going to release a sort of quick start guide at some point in the near future. Don't hold me to that. I could be lying completely, but that is the goal, to get it into people's hands that want it, and have them mess around with it and give me feedback. Will all that feedback make it into the final version? Probably not. It really depends. It depends on if it fulfills what I want it to. That is the advantage of making your own game. But also, I am very prone to peer pressure, and if enough people say something, maybe I'll do it. But yeah.
You heard that? You heard that here, folks. Bully them into making a sequel. The first one's even finished.
Wow.
So we're a podcast that has members in multiple countries, so we can't really meet up in person for games. Do you have any plans to sort of integrate this game with Roll20?
So not Roll20 specifically, although I probably will just do Roll20 on my own. However, yeah. However, there is a company called Dice Weaver that has a VTT that the owner / main contributor / person who does everything has reached out to me and wants to put my game into Dice Weaver. Dice Weaver is really, really fascinating to me. I'm pretty picky about VTTs. I don't use them a lot of times. I begrudgingly use Roll20 because it seems to be the one that fits my brain the most, and I've learned to use it. If you like it, you don't like it, that's whatever. But
it's what we use.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely like the
most well-known one, I think.
Yeah, and it's the most compatible. It has the ability to adapt to a lot of systems without too much coding to be done. There are other ones that have touted it, but I haven't found one that really enables anyone to just like put their own system into it. So
yeah,
honestly, so like honestly, it's just this guy reached out to me. I liked his product, and it seems like it'll be a good fit. But I will likely put something out on Roll20 as well.
Yeah, we've seen everything from card games to coins to obviously dice and Roll20. Apparently they're integrating it with Discord somehow. I haven't looked into that myself, but I've heard about it.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
So, with any of the games you've run so far, have you got any specific memorable moments? Has there been any eye-opening events, or just ones you can't stop laughing at?
I really like... So I have this artist named Hodag. He's done some other OSR stuff. He's somewhat well known, but he actually illustrated this moment of a Norse person blowing up a U-boat, a submarine, and oddly enough, that happened my very first playtest, and I don't think the person had seen the art yet. I don't even think I had released it yet. But it was very epic, and I don't use that term lightly, despite being a millennial and overusing the term epic. It was a very grandiose display of power that set the scene quite well. In a lot of playtests, I sort of start people out on you have to get across this part of water. There are German U-boats, there are patrol vehicles and things like that, and everyone was really quite scared because there's a lot of guns and they don't have any guns. So they made their way about halfway and happened to roll poorly, and a U-boat shows up and surfaces and is causing quite an alarm, and I believe they were a worshipper of Thor, a follower of Ivar the Boneless, and maybe a soothsayer, maybe a vulva. But at any rate, called down an exceptional blast of lightning, exploding the U-boats and causing others to flee and then Ivar has this gives their constituents an ability called Cold and Calculated, where basically through military prowess they can rout their enemies, but also sort of cripple them at the same time. And it made the rest of the encounter rather trivial, which was cool because the first half was rather slogging. But yeah, that was a fun moment.
Nice. So, what, other than like actual Norse mythology, what resources or books or games have you drawn upon for inspiration?
Oh, so many. So I'm a bit of a collector as far as RPGs come. I own conservatively upwards of 150, and I've only been collecting for about 3 years. Yeah. So a lot of inspiration from a lot of things, but specifically the Black Hack, and more notably the Black Sword Hack, which was put out by the Merry Mushman and a wonderful writer by the name of Kobayashi. Exceptional ability to have modular characters that don't all feel the same. I find that if a lot of classless systems tend to have all the same character, you're all just a guy with a sword and you have one or two defining characteristics. But yeah, so Black Sword Hack by Merry Mushman, or by Kobayashi rather, distributed by Merry Mushman, is probably a very big influence. As far as mythology and resources and other things, like I said, the Goetic magic and the Key of Solomon are a big influence on the enemies. Visually, things like Junji Ito and Berserk, as far as darkness and grit go, that is actually a carryover from Grindcore's original setting called Veil Thinners, which Chris Koger came up with. And then,
I've heard of that one.
yeah, it's not out yet, so but I'm sure he would love to talk about it at some time. This No Nazis in Valhalla will actually be Grindcore's first public setting, so it'll be interesting. It's a bit more OSR, but also just tons of Norse mythology, and specifically the sagas of the Icelanders. I want more. So a lot of people tend to focus on the barbarism and the animalistic nature of Vikings and all the machismo and puffing up your chest and what have you. But they were also just like people. So I like to examine the multifaceted nature of while yes, they were career soldiers, they were also farmers and things like that. So I kind of like to make them more believable as people. The sagas are a good demonstration of that.
Cool. Well, since you said you had 150 RPGs on your collection, can you name a few that you particularly enjoy?
Oh, absolutely. So we have Broken Tales by World Anvil. Uses the Monad Echo system. It's very cool. You get to roll as many d6s as you would like, which is... It's fun to see a player be like, I can roll 100 d6s? Sure you can. But if you roll a single one, your entire action is considered a failure. I also like games that sort of fail forward. So while, yes, you may fail that roll if you roll 100 dice and you get a single one, obviously the implication is that you probably set out what you meant to do, just you are in a less advantageous position. Let's see. Troika is one of my first loves as far as OSR games are concerned. That is Melsonian Council. Melsonian Arts Council. The game itself is based on fighting fantasy by a person named Steve Jackson, not Steve Jackson Games, Steve Jackson. It's very confusing. But that one's just goofy and has a lot of genuine randomness that is enjoyable. RuneQuest, specifically the latest edition of RuneQuest, as y'all know, with that system, percentile based, it's the same system as Call of Cthulhu. Very fun, very crunchy. The combat took me a minute to get my head around. Certainly the Cypher system. I run an old Gods of Appalachia game once a month. That's always fun. But yeah, all over the place.
Yeah, sounds it. Once we finish this, I'll give you a couple of recommendations of ours if you'd like.
Sure, absolutely.
That's our resident Kickstarter junkie. Can't help himself.
Ain't that the truth? Well, speaking of Kickstarter, how did you find the Kickstarter running? You know, how was that for you?
So this one was I was a bit more concerned. My first one I funded within like 4 hours, so I was like really jazzed about it. Yeah, it was really cool. Maybe it was like 6 hours, but still. And that's because it's a Morkborg adventure and Morkborg sells itself. But I was surprised that I succeeded on this one because I think halfway through the campaign and I was losing traction. So I just like put out a call to all my friends. I'm like, hey, if you could spread this around, I would really like to at least make this. That'd be cool. And I did all right. I did double my goal, I think. My goal wasn't crazy. Let's see, I'll pull it up right here. Yeah, my goal was 2,000. I made it 5,000. So yeah, pretty decent. And everyone who has signed up for it seems like super into it, which is even better than doing really well. I am much more interested in players playing my game that really want to play it rather than picking it up. As a Kickstart junkie myself, I know sometimes I will back a game without really thinking about it. I'm like, this looks cool, and then I'm like, wait, but I have 10 other games that are like that. Do I really want this? Yeah.
Just quickly then, what's the biggest amount you've dumped on a KS?
360 US dollars. So.
Oh, that's not too.
Yeah, no. I have some self-restraint, and I'm poor, so.
Matt once,
Ain't we all?
Matt once sent me a screenshot of a Kickstarter he was pledged to, and it was in a different currency. It was in pounds, and it had 999. Like,
oh yeah,
99 on it.
Oh, that was the SKE.
Yeah. Well, that's like.
I not only believed he'd done it, I was like, man, no, not again.
No,
not again.
You have to eat. You have to pay for a home.
Can't keep doing it.
Yeah, it's always a struggle. And then being like, oh yeah, I could pay that off over the next 6 months, and then doing it 5 times, and then you're like, oh yeah. Turns out I'm just buying a Kickstarter every month.
Yep.
Podcasts are also a specific type of evil to each other, that if we're low on money, other members of the podcast will like immediately start looking on Kickstarter and recommending shit. This is a PvP enabled podcast.
Yeah, clearly.
Well, I think we've asked everything we need to ask.
Not quite.
Oh no, we missed something.
Yeah, so do you have any plans? Sorry if you can hear a dog absolutely losing his fucking mind. So what are your plans for after the game's release? Expansions, updates?
Yes.
Further games?
Yes, almost certainly. Definitely further games, that's no doubt. But specifically, even with just the amount of gods that I want to put in to this game, 48 pages is not enough to fit this. It will probably end up being more than 48 pages. Don't tell my backers. although they'll be happy about it. But my next immediate project is a expanded version of Beyond Deep. We're going from a 100-page perfect bound book to at least a 200-page hardback book. Yeah, kind of like a real, like, it's going to be a setting book for Morkborg. We're going to try to sort of balance the Appalachian Southern United States horror with the medieval grimdark horror. The first one's leans a little bit too much into the modern era, but at any rate, it will be a plethora of quest hooks, monsters, items, NPCs, several areas to explore, and that sort of thing. And eventually I'd like to do that with No Nazis in Valhalla. I'd like to have a big old historical map of 865 England. All the different kingdoms are quite fascinating, and would lend a lot to story prompts and things like that. So it's definitely in my immediate future. I may even do it. I'll probably start before I even release this one, like before it gets printed. So
yeah, nice. How would we see a lot of TTRPGs, a lot of Kickstarter ones too, get funded, be successful, and have people want to make essentially homebrew or one-shots of it. How would you feel about people doing that for No Nazis in Valhalla?
Go for it. I am the one-shot master. Not really. I don't think I'm quite that good at it. However, I run one-shots I've done over 20 systems already this year. I plan to do 52. I was trying to do one a week. This month kind of got bungled up due to various things. But I actually specialize in teaching TTRPGs that are not Dungeons and Dragons over on a Discord called the Titterpig Academy. If you all ever want to pick up a game and it fits into your time schedule, I highly recommend that server. At any rate, I want people to take what I have and use it to their own needs, unless it is a power fantasy of fascism and siding with the Nazis. I'm not particularly fond of that. Unfortunately, there's not a real way I can stop that. But I do, as in my first book, and I will put in this book, a big old disclaimer that I don't like bigots and I don't want them interacting with my stuff. Generally, that turns them off. They don't like being told what to do, so they don't even purchase it. And that's what I like to see. But yeah, I would love anyone to tell me their stories of No Nazis in Valhalla when it comes out and their experiences with it. I think it's fun.
Will there be a way of pre-ordering it for those of us that missed the Kickstarter?
Absolutely. I will be opening up a backer kit either at the end of June or the beginning of July. I will keep everyone posted on that. I did that for Beyond Deep, and it did quite well for me, and backer kit, honestly, is probably where I'll run my crowdfunding in the future. I prefer their tools. It's just that Kickstarter has a lot more traction and search engine optimization and things like that. So, but yeah, there will be a way.
All right. And finally, do you have any advice you'd give to aspiring TTRPG creators?
Oh, totally. The biggest one, just do it. It's not as hard as you think it is. I have read more like half-crafted ideas that I enjoy than fully fledged RPGs that are just like 300 page paperweight. And I think people's ideas are much more varied and interesting if you just have a weird idea and you're like, I don't even know how this would work. Write it down on a napkin, go to your two friends and be like, hey, play this game with me, roll these dice. You don't have to have a full session to, like, it doesn't have to be a proper RPG session for it to be a testing session. You can literally just say, okay, this orc attacks you, roll these dice because I want to see how this mechanic works. You know, it doesn't have to be anything more than that. Now, I will say, while you should just do it, you should also edit it. You should also get someone to edit it. You should build in to every Kickstarter budget a budget for editors. There are a ton in the community that will charge something like 10 cents a word. For reference, that's about $1,000 for a 48-page zine, which sounds like a lot. However, when you're printing a zine, I'll give you a peek behind the curtain. If you're printing anything more than 100 copies, you're probably printing them at $4 or $5 a piece. So your print cost is really low. Also, pay yourself. Don't think that you don't deserve any money because you're doing something you like. Pay yourself. However, I do like to adopt the policy of everyone eats before I do. So I tend to pay my collaborators more and sooner than I pay myself. So take
Very
that for what you will. I try to be.
Yeah. Well, I think that's unless I've forgotten anything else, Jay.
No, I think we're good.
Well, I say thank you very much for your time and discussing your absolutely amazing sounding game. I can't wait to play it soon as well.
Yes, very soon.
Where people can find you, if you want to.
Yeah, sure. TikTok I'm super active on there as far as social media goes. Nuclear Wessels, but also Twitter under Wes Ascalese, if anyone uses that anymore. Instagram under Atomic Wessels, kind of all over the place. But also, if you just search up Spooky Bell Games, we're going to start posting there more often. We're all really bad at social media when it comes to like a company, so it is what it is. But yeah.
Is your name a Star Trek joke?
It is. Yeah.
I thought so.
Yes, of course. Yes. I actually, it was before I was even a Trek fan, which I think is very funny. I had a friend who called me Wessels all the time, and I was like, why do you call me that? And he explained it to me, and then it just kind of became my internet handle because it's a pretty good one, and a lot of nerds enjoy it, so...
Yeah, right. Well, thank you very much for your time. This has been A Pint of Cthulhu, and I think we're going to sign off now. So, keep your ears peeled for the playtest, which should come out at the same time this is released, if not a little bit later. But until then, thank you very much, and goodbye.